This is Fans on the Run, a podcast made by, for, and about Beatles fans. And now, here's your host, Alexanian.
Welcome back to Fans on the Run, the most profane Beatles podcast. And I wear that as a badge of honor sometimes. I'm having a great day. I am slightly medicated. I am, all is right in the world. The sun is in the sky. It's not particularly blue out, but, we haven't reached our inevitable supernova death. That's coming in a couple billion years. So we got some time to talk about the Beatles till then. Oh, man. I am very, very excited to talk to our guest today. Our guest today has had a prolific career in TV and film. He was the author/co-author of such books as 8 Arms to Hold You, The Beatles, All You Need Is Love, and Tom Murray's Mad Day Out with the Beatles. And he is directing and producing an upcoming documentary all about this wonderful Beatle fandom called Here, There, and Everywhere. We're kind of kindred spirits in a way with our, love of everything fan-related. Would you please give a round of applause, even though I can't hear it because I am both wearing headphones and I have no idea where you are, to Simon Weitzman. Welcome to Fans on the Run.
Thank you, Ethan. I've very seldom had a build-up like that. It's usually preluded by, you have a right to remain silent. Anything you say will be taken down and can be used in evidence against you, but thank you.
Well, that's one way. There's been a couple episodes where it's nearly gone that way. But those are for the private archive.
Those are for the bleep button.
Yeah. Well, you're an author. There's been some authors who I've actually had to bleep out their names because I'm afraid of them.
Well, there's a few that there's no authors particularly in the Beatles world that I'm particularly afraid of, but I have met a few that I've been terrified by over the course of my life in different areas. There are a few out there, and there's also a few authors out there that are so distinctly different to the words that they put on paper. You meet them and you think, well, they must be kind of like this or they must be like that, and they're nothing like the person that you would imagine has written this horror story or this science fiction story or any of it.
Yeah.
So
just like how I appear as like an exuberant, full of life teenager, but really I'm a pill addicted, mentally ill mess. Real life.
Welcome to my world. I've got 30 odd years on you, to be honest, Ethan, and so far, it's medication at my age becomes preservation.
Yeah.
And so I'm.
Okay. This is how my brain works. You said preservation. The first thing that came to mind is the Kinks Village Green Preservation Society.
Oh, well, there you are. So I go to the New Orleans Preservation Jazz Band, so that's more of my sort of generation, I guess.
Well, two sides. Well, it's not my generation either. The album came out in 1968. I was born in 2002.
Well, there you are. Well, you don't want to rush anything, to be honest, Ethan. You don't want to kind of catch up too soon.
No, catching up is for squares.
Totally.
So, I like to start off. How has your day been so far?
My day's been sort of weird, but kind of vaguely interesting. I've just got back from seeing a friend of mine who was the manager for. There's a cartoon called Simon's Cat.
Okay, I've heard of Simon's Cat.
Familiar with it? So he was the manager for the person that was doing another Simon called Simon's Cat. And my mum, because I'm an artist as well, my mum always thought I had the secret career doing this cartoon animation series. And I really do wish I had been, because otherwise I wouldn't be as impoverished as I am now. But it is the kind of stuff I do. It's my kind of humor. But so I've been doing that. And then we've been collecting testimonials for the film that we're doing at the moment. So we've just got one in from Neil Harrison, and Neil is the co-owner of the Bootleg Beatles, and the original John Lennon in the Bootleg Beatles. And so Neil is a friend of mine, and he's done a testimonial for us. He did that this morning for us, and otherwise we are kind of getting ready. I don't know when this goes out, but we are here in the UK. We're getting ready for the sequel to the first Lockdown, which starts on Thursday.
Lockdown 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Lockdown 2.0 X, and which is going to be, I guess, much like the first one, apart from the fact we're all going to go out and work and do stuff.
Yeah. Lockdown, but this time no one pays attention.
Well, unfortunately that may be the case, and that's been what's been happening so far. But it's interesting because, of course, there is going to be a much more captive audience, of course, for wonderful broadcasters like yourself over the next sort of month and a half, probably.
Okay, you talk to Whispering Bob for your thing. Don't call me I'm not a broadcaster.
You are a broadcaster. I was talking to Bob yesterday, actually, and Bob has been doing a charity single, which is Some Miles.
That's a Stand By Me.
Yeah. So I'm actually doing something, hopefully with Bob at the end of the week, to help sort of promote that. And that's an astonishing piece of work, whether you're a Beatles fan or just a music fan in general, to kind of get 20, 30 people of that ilk. To get his Black Book is amazing. To get that kind of group of people together and get them individually recording things, and then his son Miles to put together that based on what he's received and the video on what he's received is truly extraordinary. I said to Bob yesterday that Miles is very much in the Giles Martin sort of sphere. The potential of that kid is astronomical.
Well, I can't, is it out yet?
Yeah, I think it's been out. It came out on Friday.
Okay.
So it's only been out sort of for about 3 or 4 days. But it's obviously the charity is to kind of raise money for musicians who, of course, can't gig or can't go out and do anything live at the moment. So he's trying to sort of do this kind of global thing, mostly UK, but global in theory, which helps.
Everyone out there, go buy that single.
Go buy the Stand By Me Whispering Bob Harris single, because it is just stunning. It's a great cause. And if you are a musician, or if you know musicians, or if you love music, then and you do have a few dollars or a few pounds or a few euros free, then it's definitely something to link into.
As musicians ourselves, you're a musician, right?
I'm a terrible musician. I have to tell you, I can mix stuff, and I'm pretty good at putting sequences together, but I am a fairly awful player. I mean, I started off as a bass guitarist, but I'm to quote Woody Allen, I was so bad at learning it. I spent the first 6 months blowing into the neck. That's how bad I was at playing bass. And I've never really, I enjoy tinkering around with musical instruments. I can play a bit of piano, but I can't play it when anyone's looking.
Yeah. Well, but technically a musician. So as it's a cause dear to our hearts, the musicians around the world. So
yes, it's a cause that if you're a lover of music, 99% of the human race is.
Well, then everyone listening to this podcast.
And everyone listening to this podcast, unless they're just completely weird.
Yeah. Well, but there's probably some of those too.
Oh, absolutely. And hi to those guys. Hi. How you doing? You weirdos.
Yeah. Who just like hearing the sultry sounds of my nasal voice.
Or two people just talking randomly from across the Atlantic. Yes. Yeah. Welcome, everyone.
But I think we should probably transition over to... What's the name of that band? God.
The Who?
No. Dave Dee, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tich?
Oh, yeah, the Monkees.
Yeah. Okay, I'm legally obligated to mention Dave Dee, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tich in every episode in some form or another.
Yes.
Whether or not the reference goes over with my American guests, it doesn't matter. It's for me.
Get with the program.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, I'll jump right back to the beginning. Simon, how did you first discover the Beatles?
My parents used to listen when I was growing up and I grew up in the days of vinyl records. So
vinyl records, could you explain to the people at home what those are?
They're like massive CDs. Yeah.
Now, explain to the people at home what the CD is.
They're like really small vinyls.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you are. So my parents used to have a sort of fairly eclectic kind of mix of things. So they listened to some classical music. They listened to. We were a Queen household, to be fair. So I grew up with Queen. They were my band in many ways when I was very little, and we listened to ABBA, of course.
Oh, ABBA's great.
And but we did have. My parents had Rubber Soul, Sergeant Pepper, Revolver, and so we did. They would be on every week, and I would listen to them. But I think it was probably when I was about 12, and I kind of had this, what I like to call girlfriend in Austria, and what she liked to call pen friend in England. She used to say, we used to have this thing back in the day, which you guys are now getting back into, called mixtapes.
Yeah. So
we would send each other a kind of collection of songs that we liked usually from the radio on a cassette tape, and the last song on it was The Long and Winding Road. And that really kind of re-sparked my interest in the Beatles when I was about 12, which would have been in about 1843. In about 19... So when I was 12, it would have been about 1979.
Yeah.
So, I was too young to be... I was born while the Beatles were kind of finishing their career, but I wasn't born in time to really appreciate their work at the time. And Long and Winding Road.
You kind of brought up, like, the mixtape, which you said it still kind of happens these days, but in the form of, like, playlists, which I think is really nice, because the concept of the mixtape is, sharing music you like with someone. And I really like that concept is still alive and kicking.
It is lovely that it's come back, and it's kind of weird and exciting.
And it's easier to do than ever.
Yeah, and it's exciting that cassette tapes have come back as well.
Okay, that I'm less excited about.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a factory that makes pencils, you're saved. The cassette is back, because you can now wind them back up when they come undone, so I think that's the beauty of the cassette tape is, what came first, the pencil or the cassette tape?
Well, Bic pen stocks just shot right up when you said that.
Oh, well, you see, I've just bought shares, so yeah.
There you go. Well, see, this is in the business what we like to call insider trading.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. Just make notes, everyone.
Yeah.
Keep up.
Stocks with Ethan. Probably lead you to a financial crash worse than 2008.
Well, it's going to take some doing, to be fair. But I would say, so going back to your point, Long and Winding Road was the song that kind of ignited my sort of interest as a sort of youngster back into the Beatles thing. And I think it was the last song on the tape, and it meant something to me. It sort of meant that, the long and winding road that leads to your door, which kind of, to me, meant that she was kind of longing for me to come over and go all the way to her. And I think from her point of view, to be honest, it was more about there wasn't a road that was long and winding enough, that was far away enough.
Oh, I felt that one. Oh, man. Hang in there.
So it's ended to be true. Seldom heard from her again.
So... apart from those copies in your house of Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, Rubber Soul, what was the first Beatle record that you remember getting on your own?
I remember getting on my own. Actually, to be honest, I went and...
Or you could have stolen it.
I could have stolen it. I didn't. I'll be honest with you, the first... album, because it was an album that I bought. It was I went out and I think something happened to the needle on the record, so I went out and I bought Rubber Soul, the album.
Again?
No, again. Yeah. And that was kind of the first physical time I'd been out and bought an album on my own with my own money or fair change. And I played that to death as well. And, like every kid at that time, I got my bass guitar and I sat in, when you're bad at bass, when your parents help you buy a bass guitar and then they buy you an amp, but then they buy you headphones.
Yeah. Oh, that hit too close to home. Oh.
So that's when you know that there are other things in life that you probably should be doing. But that was kind of what got me kind of really interested in kind of instruments again and playing a bit.
I'll
At my
ask you,
horrendous level.
since your family also had like Rubber Soul, did the music mean like did it hit you deeper when it was your own copy and not just the family's? Like it was yours.
I think it did. I think it's a very good point, because it just sort of, rather than just being something that you're listening to as a playlist that's kind of been selected by somebody else that you're making. Granted, it was a fairly crap decision, because I'm sort of making a decision that's already been made by my parents to buy that album, and I go out and buy it again, mainly because it's slipping and scratching and falling all over the place, and I really like that album. So, but it did, yeah, it took on a new meaning, because it was something that I suppose if you own your own collection of records, you, for some reason, particularly when you're younger, you listen much more intently to them than when they're just being played by somebody else for you.
Would you consider yourself a collector?
I'm not a collector. I'll be honest with you. I am not a collector. I'm not a hoarder. I'm not a collector. I'm not a huge materialist, to be honest. Though you wouldn't believe that if you looked around the room here, because it's just littered with stuff. But yeah. I'm not really I was always happiest, to be honest, when I was out filming. On the road, I went around the world making TV shows and working on films. So I was always happiest when I was just kind of a few things in a suitcase or a holdall. That's when I feel the most decluttered and the least anxious.
Well, to me, I feel like incomplete without, my record collection and my, guitars, my like little Beatles figures. It's it's all part of it just makes me feel warm being in this room.
Well, I can see it, obviously.
Yes. The viewers at home can't.
They can only imagine it. It's quite spectacular, everyone. There's records, there's guitars, there's cameras, there's a blue Sgt. Pepper jacket hanging on the door. This guy's pretty serious about what he does. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Well, I like the Beatles. What can I say? So, I want to ask you, what do the Beatles mean to you? You specifically? Specifically
to me, they are what they mean to me, to be honest, is hope and freedom. Hope because they showed the way for a lot of regular kids who came from not such privileged backgrounds and sort of middle class and working class backgrounds, that it is possible to make a success of your life. So that would be the kind of the hope sort of factor, and freedom being the fact that they really weren't aware of what the rules were.
Yeah.
Maybe there weren't so many rules, but they weren't aware of the rules that were there at the time. So
that's kind of how I treat this podcast. Yeah, it's like exactly. There are no rules.
There are no rules, and if there are no rules, then the fear of what could go wrong, or the fear of what other people think of you, disappears, or at least dissipates in some respect, and you are more able to carve out something that is a niche, that is different or unique. And of course, the Beatles were particularly good at doing something that was ultra unique, because they had this incredible sort of gathering of sort of like-minded souls. In fact, they probably weren't that like-minded souls, but it was the perfect storm, the perfect collection of people that were able to just kind of generate this super catalogue or canon of incredible ruleless work, and as they went forward, they tore the rule book up. And in many ways, the weirdest thing about modern music is that it's kind of followed their rules.
Well, I can only speak. Well, I want to touch on kind of one of the things you said. I can't really speak to being, British, because I'm Canadian, but the Beatles come from working class town, Liverpool, the docks. Up until then, it was just kind of what the President of the United States would call a bit of a shithole. But they made it. Liverpool's now like the capital, or it was like the capital of culture in the entire world. And I can only imagine like how inspiring it was for other kids in, other towns, like northern town, Manchester, Birmingham, I don't know.
Well, I think, in all fairness, to be honest, Ethan,
did that make any sense?
That sort of makes sense. The only thing I'd say is that when the Beatles were around, it was always a very working town. It's a working city rather, and there's another dynamic to Liverpool, which is that it's the people. The people are very different, I think, in this country to anyone else in this country. They have a spirit that the rest of this country don't have.
I was fortunate enough to go to Liverpool a number of years ago, along with a trip to like London, and do the whole walk across the Abbey Road and Beatles tour. Shout out to my mum for taking me on that trip with a Beatles emphasis. She's the best. But I noticed just the people in Liverpool, it was like salt of the earth, They just, no matter who you are, they were just so friendly.
Yeah, and I think, they've had to really earn their place as the city of culture. And very late in the day, to be honest, as well, because I think it probably was something they deserved many decades before. Yeah. But, however, there's a spirit and a hope, again, in Liverpool that isn't really present to the same degree in other cities in this country. But when I was growing up, I was quite a good football player, soccer player, as it will be in America. And so I used to go with my junior part of the soccer team that I joined, and we used to go and play to an empty, like it is now, to an empty stadium at Anfield, and you used to drive through on minibuses, as it was back there, to the grounds, and we went through some pretty rough patches and parts of Liverpool, and even driving through the middle of Liverpool at the time, this is kind of late 70s, early 80s to be honest. There was still a lot of development to be had and seen in Liverpool. It was a fairly, there wasn't a lot of money around at all, and you could see that.
The city centre's not like what it is today.
No, not at all.
There's no Matthew Street, tourist trap.
No, you're looking at a place where all the culture was being squeezed to death. When I was growing up, it was literally falling apart. People were struggling to kind of preserve it. People didn't really understand. I think nationally we didn't understand the value of what had gone before, and it was only really a sort of like a handful of very brave souls that sort of became this much bigger mass, and then sort of forced Liverpool back on the map, really. And so I think when you think back to when the Beatles were growing up, they not only were they contending with what was going on socially and politically in the world, but they didn't come from the world's most extravagant or wealthy city. They came from a relatively poor city, which had ambitions, and that was, I think, what was the key. That city, whatever it's had, has always been ambitious, and that's why I think they were so successful.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask, are there any memories throughout your life in particular that involve the Beatles in some way that stick out to you as happy moments in your life that are like punctuated by the Beatles?
Happy moments is a good one. Yes, I think so. And that's fairly recently, to be honest. My friend Paul Skellett, who is a brilliant artist and book designer, and an all-round good guy and a very good musician as well. He and I started working on different books, and we went into some crazy episodes and various things that we did. And then Paul really reignited my interest in the Beatles, because he is an absolute fanatic like you. He's got, yards of albums and, this version of the album and that version of the album. And, he's got various guitars and he's got stuff, he's just a proper fan. And we started doing these Beatles Beatles books in about 2014. It's only 6 years ago now. So at the ripe old age of around about 46, I'm starting to get really in my second childhood of Beatles. At a relatively older age. They've always been in my life. My mum's brother Richard has always been nuts about the Beatles and plays their songs beautifully, and so it's always been in our heart, but it hasn't been so front and center. So we were working on a job up north, which has been, some of the people involved in it have been great, others haven't been so great. Mm-hmm. And I was standing on the stairs of a property, overlooking this incredible view of a loch, and thinking, I've really got to get back into doing something that I love doing, which is filmmaking. And, the subject I want to do is these incredible fans, because, you meet these people at the festivals, and, it's a difficult trip, because you sort of think, how are these people you've never met them, how are they going to accept you, what's it going to be like, are they going to see through you, because we're very new to that kind of world.
Well, the last Beatle Fest in Chicago was my very first one, and so I can really relate to what you just said.
Yeah, and it's, you go there and you sort of think, and you are nervous. I mean, if you suffer from anxiety like you and I do, you are anxious about what's going to happen when you get to these places. And we found it really easy. People embraced us. Obviously there was some skepticism, I'm sure, deep down with certain people. But I think the fact that if you're brave enough to do, and you're brave enough with your conviction, and you're not doing it just to kind of put your hand up and go, I am the big I am, then that world audience is just incredibly kind of, it's a family. And I just wanted to, in 2016, I sort of thought, I want to do this, I want to make this film about these fans, and I don't want it to be a history project because it's been done, and there are people far more qualified than me to do it. And I just want it to be something that the fans really love, and not only love, but they can be part of, and they can actually help construct. And it's a love letter from us as fans back to the band, but it's also a love letter, I suppose, from me to the fans that took me in.
Yeah. Well, it's I'll touch on this about just the warmth and generosity of this Beatles community. The first Beatle Fest, it was about a month or two. Oh no, it was about a year after my dad had passed away, and there was like a big long legal battle. It was not fun. I had spent most of the year miserable, and then the shining light in August, there was the Fest for Beatles fans in Chicago, and I didn't know what to expect going there. Like, I thought, are these people going to be, elitist snobs? It's like, oh, you don't know exactly what they recorded on July 17th, 1968 at 4:20 p.m. But no, these people embraced me with open arms. They made me feel like I was a part of a family, which is something that I had, ever since my own, or part of my own family kind of fractured after my dad died. It kind of felt like it filled that void in a way, and it made me feel just warm and like I was a part of something. And for that, I'll always be grateful.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, we were talking about this, and we'll talk about it again, I'm sure. Yeah. But, when my dad died 7 months ago now, and it was, it was sort of out of the blue. And I wrote a little thing on Facebook about my dad and my relationship with my dad. And, my soccer team's community, they all were brilliant, and of course, we're amongst contemporaries. It's happened to so many of us, obviously it will always happen. But, the Beatles community was incredible. There was so much love and so much sympathy and empathy. And it was a big help for me. It was a huge help.
So, kind of mentioned the fest. I always like talking about these when it comes to fests. We could even have you done the Liverpool Beatle Week?
Oh yes, I mean,
what are those
times.
like? I've never been to one myself.
Well, they're very different. So I would say, they're all unique. So, all these festivals are unique. I went to the Abbey Road on the River Festival with Tom Murray in about 4 years ago, three years ago or something now, and we had a great time. And it was a very interesting. It's a musical festival, and then obviously since about 2014, we've been going to the Fest for Fans in New York and in Chicago. And I have to be honest, I have a bit of a love affair going on with them. I just think it's really funny. When somebody sets up these kind of festivals, there are people that look to them and they say, oh, and they're doing it because they just want the money or they want to do this. Having stayed, I'm saying generally with festivals, not obviously with these ones. But having stayed, I was very lucky. I stayed with the Lapidus family, and I, for a few days at a very, very difficult time in my life as well. And, there is a genuine love and a genuine kind of excitement and passion for what they do. And that just radiates out across this whole community. So without them kind of being at the forefront of that and showing their love for it, then that sort of tailors down. And I think, sorry, I'm just going to cough for a minute.
Don't worry, he's not contagious because this is an audio podcast.
Yeah, just wash your ears at the end of this podcast. Is that so when you come and you go to something like the International Beatles Week. Sorry, can you hear that, by the way? There's alarm going off in the background.
I don't mind it. It reminds me of Fire Brigade by The Move.
It's okay. No, it's probably somebody stealing my car.
Yeah,
but
that would be c'est la vie.
It is insured. But anyway, so the International Beatles Week is, I think it's an extraordinary week. Well, it's more than a week now, or it was. But and that's been going on for quite some time, and it's organised obviously by the Cavern Club. So all the people at the Cavern Club, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they put it all together. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm always in awe of how they put the Fest for Fans together in Chicago and New York, how they managed to pull it off. But when you go to Liverpool and then you see something that's across 20 venues or whatever it would be, and there's massive concerts going on, and there's different set lists, and then there's days where you can buy stuff, and then there's all these little pop-up bands and venues.
I've seen videos and pictures of their marketplace. The marketplace at the Fest for Beatles fans wrung me dry, so to speak. I think I'd have a mini stroke if I went to the marketplace at the Beatle Week, because I would just be like, oh my god, all this stuff. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, credit card on the run.
Yeah.
As a phrase. Yeah. It is. I mean, but I think the organisation that goes into it, and I know, John Keats is a really good friend of mine. He's really super fella. And, the amount of work they put into putting that on and making sure that it runs as smoothly as it does, and the amount of people they manage to get into it, and the way that those people interact, where it's much more. What's really great about the fest is, you get into one building and you're kind of trapped, in this wonderful world of Beatles love.
It's like an all-inclusive resort.
It is. It's extraordinary. Yeah. And then when you get to Liverpool, it's this much more sprawling, multi-venue, multi-kind of pop-up, sort of faceted animal.
Well, the thing is, I don't think I could do that because I don't like walking very much.
Oh, well, I mean, the thing is everything's very close together. So, I mean, I think one of the things that really impressed me is that, if you walk around and you do 10,000 steps in a day, you kind of feel that you've done 10,000 steps. You've done it. I would say partially at the Festival Fans you get that, but certainly in Liverpool when you're walking from one sort of thing to another, and they're all quite close to each other, and you just kind of look through the venue list of what's going to be happening and the set lists and the talk lists and all these things, and you walk from place to place and you do things, and then you look at your kind of like your phone pedometer or your pedometer, and you've done like 20,000 steps and you haven't even noticed it.
Well, now I want to ask you what led you to this wonderful world of Beatle books?
Well, as I said earlier on, my friend Paul Skellett is a mad keen fan, and having sort of tried to execute books in areas that we thought were going to be, successful with...
Apologies for the déjà vu.
Yeah, no, don't worry. It's happening again. We are, so Paul was really instrumental in me getting back into the Beatles. And then we kind of thought, well, everything's been done and we can't do it again. And then, because we had this little bit of a background in different areas, we kind of started picking at the scab, as it were. and we found that, yeah, of course, there are always different things. What we wanted to do, we were quite specific with the books. We knew there were books on a shelf that everyone would have, but we knew in between some of those books, there were those little gaps that we could just slip this little book into that would just bridge those areas. And that's kind of what we tried to do, really. And we started off by going in and doing it as a pledge with a company called Pledge Music, who went bust quite acrimoniously, and there's a big long tail to that. But we didn't know anyone particularly, so we just kind of started up with something from absolute scratch and raised enough money to make that book and get on an aeroplane and sell it. So that's how much kind of the fan base jumped on somebody or on people that were new and kind of embraced us. So that was kind of my introduction to them and to that fan base. And I'm really pleased because there are people, 6 years later that I still pick up the phone and ring and talk to. And, there's still people that come through every so often, ask how the film's going or if we're going to do any other books and, all these kind of things. And it's really nice. And as you know yourself, one of the things that's really unusual about this family is that in any other band, getting anywhere near the band or anyone that's around the band or knows the band, who's eaten the food that the band have left behind, all that kind of stuff, you very rarely get near them, and you very rarely kind of feel like you are on an even playing field or on the same level as them. That doesn't happen with this community. I told a story last night about meeting Jeff Emmerich literally a couple of weeks before he died. And, I sat down for 2.5 hours with Jeff, and we talked for 5 minutes about Beatles. We talked about 2 hours and 30 or whatever about our lives and about different things in our lives. Now, how many other bands with people of that ilk would you, as a regular person, be able to just sit down at a bar with and just have a chat? It just doesn't happen anywhere else.
So I want to ask you, which of the books, which one came first?
8 Arms to Hold You, which was the diary of making of Help. That was the first one.
That I own this one, and it is quite a spectacular book indeed.
We were very lucky. We were very naive, I think, in certain areas, but we were very lucky because we had a good background in knowing how to get pictures and the clearances on pictures and that kind of stuff. But we also had we made a good decision. We got in a writer called Simon Wells, who had a background in writing Beatles books, to basically hold our hand a little bit in terms of
was
the
that
writing.
A pun?
Yeah, it was, and it just almost slipped by. I almost managed to do it.
Nothing gets by this. Nothing gets by this fucker.
Yeah, that's good. So we ended up sort of. So that was an interesting book, and it was one of these things where you do these glorious things, like somebody said, "Oh, I know Richard Lester. You should phone Richard Lester and have his sort of thoughts on it." And so I ended up on the phone for about 40 minutes with this fairly startled fellow, talking about totally different things. We again another conversation where Beatles was literally 10 minutes of it, and but we kind of talked about his work on Help and all the different elements of it, and that led us to get some really great quotes from him. But also he led us to the BFI, the British Film Institute, which he had donated and loaned quite a lot of his materials from that film to. And they opened up the archive, and we were able to kind of, the things that you'll see in the book, like the costumes and some of the production pictures and the scripts and all these sort of things, were courtesy of Richard. He was very generous to us. And then we were also very lucky in the terms of, setting the scene with somebody like Paul Gambaccini, the DJ and broadcaster. And he was, again, we got on the phone with him, and poor old Paul ends up on the phone for an hour with us, having to kind of give us an education on various things, and particularly in America and how it started in America. And it was very exciting. And we kind of just, it was this kind of glorious sort of mash of different elements that kind of fell in our lap a little bit. And sort of people liked the fact that we just didn't kind of put words on a page and then a picture in a square. Paul is, let's say, eccentric with design, and but what that does is it kind of gives people not only a book, but it gives them something artistically that they can just flick through and just enjoy.
The writing is not only great, it's one of the most beautiful Beatle books I own.
Well, I will tell Paul that. He'll be very, very proud and very pleased. And I agree. He's just an exceptional... Yeah, he loves the subject, so his heart's in the subject, and that's really important.
And so the next one was the Beatles' All You Need Is Love?
That's right, yes. And that was really... It was really about the Our World satellite broadcast. It was, and how that came to be, because it was the story of the broadcast is extraordinary and starts from this tiny little acorn of an idea between Moscow and London, the BBC, and the television stations in Moscow, and then it expands into this huge thing, and then of course, days before this goes on air, the Russians, who were the co-founders of this thing, pull out, and they pull out because John is secretly writing this song, and he won't share the lyrics. He won't respond to anything. The Russians didn't know that the band had changed their image and didn't really even recognize them. Paul says about a week before they are due to go on air, he's in an interview where he's talking about taking LSD. And I suppose the Russian authorities just go, wow, we can't take the risk. They may poison our minds,
Yeah.
and you can understand at the time. But, and then you watch, I don't know if have you ever seen that satellite production?
I haven't seen I've seen bits and pieces of the full thing, but of course we've all seen the Beatles bit.
Well, of course. And the weirdest thing about it is that, of course, you have this incredible, iconic and sort of legendary moment in 4 hours of people talking about train timetables, and and different countries doing really just very dull stuff, and then you've got the Beatles.
Well, actually, you may be a good person to ask, because there's something I've always wondered. I've heard, but I have never been able to verify. In the room when the Beatles were doing the All You Need Is Love thing, there were some, famous contemporaries. There was, Keith Richards, Marianne Faithfull. I had read that the Small Faces were there.
Well, that's a good question. And to be honest, Ethan, that's not one I can answer. I don't know is the answer. I'll have to read the book again. But I can't tell you off the top of my head. It is quite possible. There were so many people actually at that particular day that are probably unrecorded. And there's a guy called Tony Bramwell.
Yes.
And Tony Bramwell would probably be the right person to ask, because of course he was there.
Yeah.
And of course he has got a fairly photographic memory of that day. So he would be a really interesting person to do, because he would be able to give you the whole cast and audience list, I'm sure, in terms of who was actually there.
Well, you just implanted an idea in my head.
Well, there you are.
Well,
so yes, I would startle and I would startle Tony and see what he says.
Why are you always saying you're startling people? You're not a very startling person.
I think it is. I mean, what I really love is a spontaneity, and I like people that take a risk, and and go with their instinct, because I've always been somebody that's kind of gone. I'm a bit of a first draft Johnny.
Yeah. Oh, that's.
And I do tend to kind of go with my feel.
Hello, that's me.
Yeah, if I feel that it's right, then invariably, even if it's wrong, generally, but if I feel it's right, then and I still stand by it, then I'm fine with it. If
you are
if it's
speaking my personal manifesto right now, Simon.
Well, that's it. If you listen too hard and for too long, you start to distort what it is that you've kind of created in the first place. And then, so I would say to anyone that's out there that's younger, and that's a great thing about the Beatles as well. One of the things that was really great about them is they went with their instinct. If they believed in what they were doing was right, they did it, and they took a calculated risk. And it wasn't even a calculated risk in their sort of world. It was kind of like, this is what we do. We go out there and we will just do what we feel is right.
And lastly, with the books, your most recent one, back in 2018 with Tom Murray.
Yes, Tom is an extraordinary character. And, not only did he have this remarkable day, which was almost a kind of an accident in many ways, it wasn't planned, and he sort of went out, he was somebody who was there to drive the cars and bring a couple of rolls of film and get a few snaps if he could, so he was very lucky. It was an incredibly fortuitous day. And but from the point of view of his career, he's one of the great Hollywood photographers. He's one of the great royal photographers. His pictures of Lord Snowdon and Princess Margaret, one of their pictures with the family, is listed in sort of 50 of the most influential pictures of the 20th century. So
wow.
He's an incredible person, but he's great fun as well. And the thing that was really interesting about Tom is that a lot of people had approached him and nobody quite knew how to make an entire book out of 23 photographs. And
so how did you manage to make a book out of 23 photographs?
It's a good. I don't know. It was actually a really easy job. It's actually probably the easiest job we've had, because one of the things we're very good at, one of the things is when you make TV shows or you make sort of documentaries or you make these kind of books, is there are going to be members of the audience who are in totally different positions. So, for instance, my generation and the generation up were kind of, that may have been around at these kind of times. They can think back to these things, but for younger generations, you have to have the social, political, cultural context. And one of the things I thought we were quite good at in those books was setting those scenes. So if you were, like yourself, a younger person, you can read these books, and not only is it just going, and the Beatles great, and here they are being great, and here's another thing of them being great, It says, well, at the time, we've got the Vietnam War going on, all these things socially, politically are going on. There's, these kind of things going on with law and order and drugs and culture and other types of music and other types of culture going on around the world, and other types of civic and civil disturbances, and racial equality and all these things, and they're all being contested with this group of people that are kind of rising above it and trying to sort of write for everyone, And so I think what we did successfully in Tom's book is set the scene for what was going on at that particular time at the, towards the end of the 60s, and what the context of him as a photographer and what was going on around the world. So I think that was one of the things that I think we did quite successfully. And then, of course, with the pictures, Paul is one of the best kind of recolorizers and remasterers of photographs on the planet, so we were able to really go to town and make the book look beautiful, make his photographs, get the most that we could out of his photographs. And also the fact that I went down to a pub, in Bury St Edmunds where Tom lives, and we sort of sat there for about 2 or 3 hours. He'd been approached by all sorts of other people. He'd turned down loads of people to do it. And we just got on really well. We just had a really good laugh. got moderately drunk.
Yeah,
and
that's how all good business decisions should happen.
It is, you have to be absolutely three sheets to the wind to get it right, and so we kind of agreed that it was just that connection of people, and that's always been the way. If you have a connection with people and you have that kind of mutual respect and trust, then it kind of comes together, and that came together really pretty easily in the end. And it was, and then the other thing was that it was very much led by Tom telling his story, his story about his life. So again, you had this context of a photographer that goes through this incredible thing as a very young man. He's running newspapers and taking photographs at an age about your age onwards. He's running newspapers. He's in Africa in a Mini being chased by elephants, and it's an extraordinary story. And so it kind of gives you that kind of background story as well. And plus we rewalked it, and to do what they had done in 8 or 9 hours took us 2 days. It just showed how the map of London had changed so much.
Well, I can only assume it's where it has, with 50 years of industrial development.
It has, and of course, with all these kind of
is the grass that had the sign "Keep off the grass." Is the grass still there?
Yeah, that is still there. That's at the church.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. In fact, very, very little has changed in that particular place.
So, did you recreate the thing where you pushed Tom off the building?
Yeah, we did. We pushed him off.
Yeah.
He bounced as well. Okay. Fortunately,
good. Dedicated to Tom Murray.
Yes, the late Tom.
Rest in pieces.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, before we kind of talk about Here, There, and Everywhere, what drew you to the fan aspect in particular? Like, because everyone has a niche. Like, my niche is also the fan stuff, but I'm kind of tackling it in a different way. But what drew you to the fans?
I think the very word you used, to be honest, Ethan, it's niche.
Yeah.
Everyone has a niche. And I think that was kind of what drew me in. It was the fact that there were a group of people and they all have these talents. And they can be absolutely 100% dedicated to doing this every single day. They can do it every single day. They can go out and live, breathe, and drink and eat the Beatles every single day. Or they can go out and do something that is their work. They could drive a bus. They can be a lawyer. They can, whatever it is, be a nurse. But this is when they come home and they can take off that kind of suit, whatever it is that they wear during the day, then the Beatles become...
They can take off the suit and put on the walrus costume.
Exactly that. And that's why I think that's why I'm so drawn to this family, because I think also, you can go to a number of different things and festivals and things, and as we said earlier on, you can get judged for the way that, you are, or the way you look, or the way that you speak, or your views.
Or how old you are.
Or how old you are, yeah. And, this is something really different. And, I think you have to go to these. I would really encourage, once the world is back to some kind of normality, for people to really get up and go to these festivals, because it is like meeting this extended family that you never knew you had. And once you know them, then, they're a pretty loyal, faithful bunch. And that's what's really impressive about them.
I concur. And so... I want to ask you, what was the genesis of Here, There, and Everywhere?
Well, exactly that, to be honest.
Well, and I'm not talking about Genesis like Peter Gabriel with the flower on his head.
Yeah. We got about 6 hours through that documentary and realised it was the wrong band.
Yeah.
And no,
one angry phone call from Phil Collins later.
One angry phone call from Phil Collins saying, "Are you sure you're not my son? You look so much like me." That has been a comparison, by the way.
Yeah.
A couple of people at the festivals or various festivals said, "Are you Phil Collins' son?" And I have to say, no, I'm not. Sadly, but
you could lie.
Sorry, I could lie. And say yes, I am. And but
easy lover.
Very good artist, but not the Beatles.
Yeah.
but probably influenced in many ways by them, as well. All these bands had the influence from the Beatles. And I'm just trying to remember what the question was now.
Oh, what was the genesis of Here, There, and Everywhere?
What was the genesis of the film? The genesis of the film was going and doing the books for about 3 or 4 years, or over 2 or 3 years, and thinking, I love these people. I just think I'd love to know more about them. I'd love to kind of join them up. I want to kind of really get into this world, and I want to share this world with an audience, with not so much with an audience outside this audience, but I think with the rest of the audience, because if you think about it, this is a huge global audience, and and it's a strange thing, to be honest, because when you make TV shows or you make a series or a one-off documentary or whatever, there is always this question, how do we hit the general audience? How do we hit that audience that is, they like it, but they don't know it, or they're not that bothered, but they may watch, or, in many ways, that wasn't really in the equation here. It's, there are 100 million or whatever it is Beatles fan in one shape or form. Probably that's a very conservative estimate, but it's miles bigger than any other TV audience. And so if you think about it in that light, that was the genesis. That was the kind of things that, you go in and you go to a festival and there's a guy or a girl sitting in a corridor and they're playing the guitar and they're brilliant. And you sort of think, I wonder what their story is, And then there is, there's like a friend of mine, Bob, who's the puppeteer.
Oh, Bob Abdo.
Who's just hilarious, and so talented, but different set of talent skills, and then you sort of see, obviously you meet the bands and you meet the people behind it, and you meet the other authors, and you meet the guys that the artists and the girls that set up and do these kind of really psychedelic things, and you just think this is a really beautiful, lovely, this is how the world should be. This is really how the world should be. These kind of weekends and these kind of breaks, they reset you. They kind of put your battery and everything back to neutral or restart you, and you do feel. It was a very distinct feeling when we went to do that first book, and we were very nervous about turning up. By the second day we were there, we felt like we'd been there forever, and and that really set the scene for us for me to kind of feel I want to make something about it. So you look around, and there are, to be honest, there's a couple of other people. There's a guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He made a really great film. He got in a car, lovely, loved this film, very brave, got in a car, and he just turned up at well-known people's houses and asked them about the Beatles. So he turns up at Henry Winkler's house.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, it's a great film.
Yeah.
And,
I think it's just called, Beatles Stories.
Something like that, yeah. And it was great, and so you look around and you see what else is out there. And I just thought one of the things that really hasn't been done is this very gentle kind of loving look at the family, and also getting the family to kind of get its 15, that sort of inverted commas 15 minutes fame, but also from the point of view of trying to make something whereby, normally you'll see a Beatles documentary and they're all brilliant and they all know their subject because they're incredibly sort of knowledgeable and have a great reputation, but you will invariably see quite a lot of the same people on different things. And I'm not saying that there aren't the same kind of people in our thing as well, but we wanted to make sure that
none of the other ones will have me.
That's it, and this is what makes our film different.
Exactly.
Otherwise it would be completely the same.
Yes.
So from the point of view of wanting to kind of, the person that writes the book, there's a friend of mine who wrote a book about the Beatles from the point of view of, with the background of the Vietnam War. And then there's, a guy who wrote a book about, the American tours, and, and then there's a guy that wrote, there's a guy, I'm not naming names so everyone knows, all of these people.
We all know who these people are.
We all know who they are, and but these people are doing amazing things, but in totally different areas, and very on a very small scale or on a very large scale. And then there are others who spend their lives touring around doing this. This is their life. You go back to the bootleg Beatles, and this is what they do. And
the bootleg Beatles in England, the Fab Four in the USA, the tribute band industry in general.
Exactly, which again right now is suffering enormously, and but we'll come back. I'm sure we'll come back. But from the point of view of So their stories, people that are connected. We did a really lovely interview with Julia Baird, and she was, she's brilliant. She's very relaxed. And then we did a story about this lady who's brilliant, who bought the first cottage, one of the first cottages in Allison Road that John lived at. It's been renovated and done, and her story was amazing because she had a massive brain injury. She had a huge aneurysm, and has lived with the effects of that, but it's still, her ambition was to get this property, redo it, and sort of do it justice. And it's an and it's a tiny little story, it's 4 or 5 minutes that we've put together, but it's all these stories interconnect and fit together. And then there's the Cavern Club, there's Rogue, there's the Fest in America, there's everything in between, and all different. There's a band who are originally from the Philippines that were wiped, half their family was wiped out in one of the hurricanes, and
oh wait, no, I'm thinking of a different band.
Yeah.
Is it the Rio Brothers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, an extraordinary story. And, sort of from the point of view of... So there's so much. And one of the things that's kind of obviously been an issue is, I thought this was going to take a year, and we're now in year 4. And, and obviously then you have this year comes up and it kind of wipes out the world, and everyone has to reset and readjust and get used to it all. So we kind of thought, well, we'll come out the stocks with not just like a film, because I think you can't really do justice with a film, but we'll do the first one. We'll get the first one out, we'll get people's reaction, and we'll test and measure by that. And then we'll start to make these kind of regular films about this family, and we'll build up, this, what we call the fan anthology films about the fans, and which is made by the fans. There are things that are in our films that are just supplied by fans. So we started off getting, music clips or little interview clips, or just little, 30-second or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And then we were getting, there's a lady called Natalie Palumbo who's in New York. She's a graphic artist, amazing character, unbelievably talented. Her brother suffers from, has non-verbal autism, and she is a carer for her brother. A lot of their language is through the language of the Beatles songs and the films and all these things. It's an extraordinary story. But she also has a condition with colours and images, so she sees colours and all sorts of other things, and the name of it's slipping for a minute. But she actually she's turned up and given us like 2 complete films, 2 sort of 8-9 minute segments, and you can, as Andy who's working with me on the edit for this and working on production with me, these are things that you can almost like grab and just drop into various different films, because why change them? They're just brilliant, and that's the whole point of this as well. This is something that's really evolved through it, is that this is, when you start a film, you have your own name on it. It's this film by Simon Weitzman, normally that's the kind of plan. That's kind of really kind of elapsed a little bit on this. This is a film that a group of people around the world have made, and a series of films that people around the world have made, and it's their film.
Well, last thing about Here, There, and Everywhere, I want to give you an opportunity to give any shout-outs to the other people working on the project with you that aren't Simon Weitzman.
That aren't me, that's fine. Without these other people, then none of this happens. So originally, 2 people who have been involved in it. Stuart Everett, who's a really great friend, huge Beatles fan, big collector, and he kind of really saw he'd bought all of our books. He sort of saw the value in what I was doing with this particular project. So he became a really close friend and advocate, and kind of helped facilitate a lot of things right near, as we got going. Very close friend of mine as well is this guy called Keith McCallum. And he and I are very close friends. Keith has been, he's a very clever man, very clever with numbers and all sorts of things, but he's been battling stage 4 cancer for 5 or 6 years. This is a project, from my point of view, that he, it's something that he's very enthusiastic about and loves, so it's the therapy for both of us on that side. That's a really big thing for us both. And then more recently, in the last few years, through a colleague of mine, a really good friend of mine who I'd done some BBC work with, introduced me to this guy called Andy Lee. This another Beatles lunatic, you know, and again, a fellow filmmaker, documentary maker, a very passionate Beatles fan, really great editor, you know, and you know, very much in the spirit of kind of the way I like to edit. And so he's kind of come on board. And, you know, we've all kind of thrown the rule, but, you know, we had this pledge music thing that kind of fell through in 2018, and we kept the list of everyone that kind of contributed to it, you know. And so we'd said to everyone, look, you know, as a group, we will make sure that when these films come out, the things that you pledged for, that you lost your, you know, the pledge took their money from them, you know, as they did for Neil Innes and all sorts of other people, that we will make sure that you get what you said you would get, you know, when the films come out, you know. And that's really been important to us because they're our friends. You know, a lot of the people that backed us and a lot of the people that have been along for the ride in many ways are our friends. So the people, you know, I'd like to thank everyone if I can, if you've got the next 6 hours or so. But you know, the reality is that film, those people that I've just mentioned are very kind of close to it. But the reality is that we've had so much enthusiasm from everyone that we've kind of been around, you know. And, you know, so the people that need to be thanked are the fans themselves, because they're the ones that have kind of taken the leap of faith with us lunatics as well, fellow lunatics, and jumped down the rabbit hole with us in many cases.
And now, here's where it gets fun. I'm going to ask you some quick-fire questions.
72 miles an hour is the average cruising speed of a cheetah over a quarter of a mile.
There you go.
Done.
No, but, okay. It's always a bit of a loaded question, but what is your favorite Beatles song?
Oh, wow, okay.
If you want to cop out, you can say top 3 or top 5.
No, that's a very good question, and it's going to put me on the spot because I know I'm going to be wrong.
There is no being wrong, except for when it comes to favorite album.
In my own mind, I would say, weirdly, and I know it's going to sound quite weird, but Twist and Shout's a really important song to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I feel happy whenever it starts.
There you go. That's all you need.
Love is all you need. And for some reason, that song, and it's a really weird thing because, of course, one of its renaissance, because all these songs get a renaissance in some sort of sense or another. Yeah. But one of the things that was really iconic was obviously in the middle of Ferris Bueller, that song comes on.
In the parade.
At the parade. And, you know, like the entire audience in the cinema just perked up immediately and sung along with it.
Yeah.
That's the power of that kind of, that's the power of something when I mean, I just think from the point of view of getting something that is a celebration of happiness, right, you can't do much better than that.
On the flip side of that question, what is your least favorite Beatles song?
I don't have one.
Oh, fuck off! Of course,
I don't have one. Actually, I was going to go back on a little thing on what I was going to say.
Okay.
One of my other favorite songs is Revolution 9.
Really?
Yeah. I just think it's the most staggeringly brilliant piece of composing. It's just an incredible work of art. It's a work of art. It's kind of like an into the. So I think one of the things that's really clever about that particular piece is that it's unbelievably unexpected, and secondly, it's the band going outside music and into art installation. So they're actually leaping out the records, they're leaping off the vinyl, they're leaping off everything and going into a totally different medium, you know. And so I think Revolution 9 is important because it just, again, it showed that you could actually break every single rule and still work. And it also showed that you could actually take an audience that are really evolved into all sorts of other different and invested into other types of the music into something completely new and completely avant-garde and completely different, and actually hold their hand through it and literally take them off the record. And I think that was probably the bravest thing I've seen any band do. And it worked, I think.
You are the first person who has said Revolution 9 is one of their favorite Beatles songs on the show.
Well, listen, if you look at it, listen to it this way. You have, The Long Winding Road. We spoke about that earlier.
Yeah.
We have Blackbird. We have Twist and Shout. We have Revolution 9. These are Helter Skelter. These are all songs by the same band in less than a decade.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Less than 8 years.
Less than 8 years. And you sort of think, how... This is not possible. It's not possible to go from, Twist and Shout or, much earlier stuff to Helter Skelter to...
Going from Love Me Do to I Want You She's So Heavy.
Yeah. It's a crazy, crazy roller coaster. There's no bad song in there.
Well, I mean, that's debatable.
Well, it's subjective.
Yeah. So, here is where it gets less subjective. What is your favorite Beatles album?
It's a good question. It's sort of changed a bit over the years. I think because Rubber Soul was so close to me, because it was the first thing I bought, and it's kind of been sort of absolutely played to death. But realistically, it's different. It's a really interesting thing. Album-wise, I think you'll find yourself, and I don't know where other fans have found this, but that changes, I think, as the years go by. I'm very, very... I love the White Album. I'm a big fan of the White Album, but that's been more recent. Okay. I love... I was always a big fan of Sgt. Pepper. I think it's a game changer in many ways, but I think as the years have gone by, it kind of tweaks a little bit, backwards and forwards a bit. Rubber Soul was very important to me as an album when I was growing up, but White Album I think is just clever. There's something, I have this kind of, I'm very artistic in some ways rather than academic, but one thing that really interests me is algorithms sometimes, particularly music, and storytelling across music. And one of the things I think is really impressive about the studio albums is that kind of algorithmic kind of level that it goes to, where people just say, yeah, but they recorded stuff and then they decided which one went in the right place, and it's just like what it sounded like. They just liked it, or it was just different. And no, there was a very, very distinct plan of action in getting those songs in those particular order, and with those gaps and breaks in between and the little things that happen. They are taking you on the Magical Mystery Tour. They're taking you through a story, and it's for you to kind of put that story together. And I think that's what's so brilliant about that kind of sense of it. So you've got earlier albums which are much more kind of song 1 to 9 or 1 to 11 or whatever, and then you've got then they go into this totally different period where they're actually painting stories and painting things, but in a particular order, and then that order has taken a lot of thought.
Okay, so your favorite album is the White Album. Today, what is your least favorite Beatles album?
Oh, these are very unfair questions, Ethan. Because
I know, I'm an unfair person.
It is, and I'm going to give you a fairly unfair answer, which is similar to one I gave earlier on, which I don't particularly have I don't really have a least favorite, because I think one of the things that you kind of get with this particular band is there's revolution and evolution going on all the time with it. So it's totally subjective. I think that there are merits to every single part of it, but if you listen to them end to end, you get a fairly particular picture if you know the band, the band's history as to where they are, not only just in life, but with each other. And so I think, I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't sort of really conform to the best and the worst of things. I think you kind of have a look at the merits in each one, and they're all judgeable. I would say
the worst kind of person.
I am. I'm awful, and but I don't. I'm sure there are people listening. Guys, just sitting on the fence. There must be something, But honestly, Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, there are good. I mean, there are stronger and weaker parts on every single album, like any album. But
if we want, we can call it a stalemate.
It's a stalemate.
Okay.
I think we'll leave it there. We'll park that one.
And now, here's my favorite part of the show. What would you like to plug?
What would I like to plug?
I'm very upfront.
Yeah. Well, okay. We are, as we've been talking about.
And the pledge drive.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we're slightly early on this. We're doing this recording slightly before it comes out, but we are going to be putting together
The episode will be uploaded closer. Tell me when, and I'll schedule it.
Well, at the moment it's in a couple of weeks, but I'll let you know closer to time, because this is slightly off air. There is a real problem at the moment. I've got a real personal problem, which is I now have, for the next 6 or 7 weeks, a completely captive audience because of the lockdown over here and the possible lockdown around the world. Mm-hmm. There's a very big difference, I think, between this lockdown and the last one. And the last one, people were... there was what we call furlough over here, so people were getting a certain amount of money and they were able to do things like, paint the house and, do the garden up and, sort of basically kind of just retrofit and DIY their way through life. This one's different. And this one's different because the well is running dry. And my slight problem, and I'm just talking to you here, Ethan, is that we could, there is an argument that we can go out and say in 2 weeks' time or just under 2 weeks' time and go, hey, we're here and, we're going to do 4 or 5 weeks and give us $5 or $25 or $50 or $100 or, however much you want to give. And it's not so much the ethical thing, but I think there is a real problem because from my point of view, it is an ethical thing, really, to be honest. I think that people are struggling now. People are struggling a bit, and we could say, well, we're going to cheer you up. We're going to put DVD in your hand or something into your, we're going to give you a pass to a film which will cheer you up, and that's great. That is great. But we don't know right now exactly when that's going to be. That's going to be probably next summer. It will be. I mean, it will be next year, but it will be probably. We wanted to bring it out like now, or we wanted to bring it out in early spring. But the world may not be back to normal by then. So it looks like it will probably be June, July, or something before we can get. So kind of sitting here right now in 2020, saying to people, we know you're sitting indoors, and we know we've got you, you're prisoners in your own house, or but we're also going to now ask you to give us this amount of money, but we're going to give you the reward for it in like 7 months' time or something. And we can do that, and there's a school of thought that we should do that because people are miserable, and maybe spending $5 here or whatever is not a big deal. I know that it's been difficult to get work recently, so for me it kind of feels like we should really kind of be holding the hands of the troops at the moment in many ways, like you're doing.
I have a suggestion,
sure.
Well, I'd be able to, if this is something you'd like, if you wanted to go ahead and give like a more immediate reward for people, I could, record a special episode of Fans on the Run, and for like exclusively for people who donate, and so that could be like an immediate reward.
Yeah, I think that would be really nice. And, we've got weird other things like screensavers and stuff for your phone and all sorts of other stuff.
But I'd be completely willing to do that for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'd really love that. So I don't know. I mean, I'll turn the question on its head to you. If you were in my shoes, and I respect your opinion, would you wait until the new year to put out a crowdfund, or would you kind of go while people are in the immediate kind of area they're in? My personal feeling is that I would prefer, I may not get the decision, but I would prefer to come out the box at the beginning of 2021 as a different year, a new year. Yeah. And say, hey, let's go for it. This is going to come out this year, and let's go for it. Let's do it. Rather than kind of like maybe kind of doing this thing where we're now building up to, we don't know which president's going to be there. We probably know in the next 2 or 3 days, and then we have Thanksgiving, we've got Christmas. People are really unsure of the world at the moment. And although what we're doing is designed to cheer people up, it may not necessarily be the best time to hit them. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think
You're my straw poll of one.
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to do it. Well, it all depends on again, because you said if they donated now, they have to wait all that time. If you can figure out something to like give them in the short little while, like I see no real issues with it.
We're doing it now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because it's crowdfunding. I don't know what the situation is that well over in the UK, but stuff's pretty good in Canada right now. Like you'd be able to get the normal donations you'd be able to get from Canada, probably the States, like Australia, all those places.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, that's good. It's just it's an interesting one for me because it's just like what do people think? So yeah, we'll take that on board and see what we can do. I mean, it will be one or two things. We'll either go with it as planned now and do what you say, and I'd very much be lovely to take you up on the offer of doing a specialized program on it. But we'll see. It's an interesting thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your program.
Oh no, it's okay. I can do this. Edit piece, take one. And we're back.
And we're back in the room.
Yeah. So, where were we talking about? Or I'll say, what would you like to plug?
Well, thank you, Ethan. As we've been talking a little bit on this, there will be the first in a series of films coming out in 2021 called Here, There and Everywhere. A lot of people that are involved with the festivals around the world know about it and have known about it for a long time, almost half as long as the Beatles were existing. And we will be putting together a crowdfunding push on Kickstarter very shortly. And that will be to help us finish the edit for the first film, obviously do the clearances that we need for music and imagery, which we've got sorted out, and just really put together the best thing and the best film that we can to cheer everyone up in 2021. That's the plan, and then just keep going and keep building what is essentially an archival project, Ethan. This is really an archive, and so we feel that we can deliver, really, hopefully something that gets people really excited in the first film, then kind of work into our sort of archive in the second and third film. But also what it will do is hopefully inspire other people to keep kind of producing and making their contributions to it, because ultimately what we want to do is build this archive at the other end.
Yeah. I just don't want them encroaching on my territory of fan podcast.
No, but I mean, one of the great things about the project is that it is this tentacled sort of animal, and so what we're trying to do with it is, we've done, there are features on the bootlegs, there are features on the Autistics, there are features on the Mona Lisa Twins, there are features on Cavern Club, on Caspar Club, there's features on the Fest, there's features on all the people that are fans, features on yourself, and all of these roads, the idea of these films and these parts is that all of these roads they're not leading to us, they're leading back out. So this is a kind of like, I think, micro looking to macro, this is kind of us looking out. So everything that comes in and goes into the film, if somebody kind of looks at your sequence on the film and really loves it, then, it's very clear that they can come and find you. And of course, one of the things, we're not saying that we're going to kind of be like the Google of Beatles, or anything. We're just saying that that's the intention. The idea is that we want people to kind of be able to go, there will be people out there, I didn't know about Ethan, this kid looks great.
Like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah, exactly that. I couldn't have put it better.
Yeah. Is there and where can people find more info on the Eight Arms, or on the Here, There, and Everywhere, and where can they find your books?
Okay, so first on the books, Some of our books, Eight Arms and Tom Murray, are printed by ACC Books, ACC Art Books. You have to kind of probably look quite around things like Abe's Books and other places to find our books now, because the original limited editions we did have all sold out. The other book is All You Need Is Love. That's Street Edition, and that is basically available through the Flood Gallery Publishing Company, who are also a London-based company. And they did the Street Edition of the All You Need Is Love book. You can still, I think, probably find various versions of the first editions, most of which are signed, probably around eBay and a few other places. A few collectors have said Abe's Books, I think I've got one or two.
Damn you, scalpers.
Yes, exactly. And then film-wise, what was the question? Sorry, what was the question?
Where can we find more information?
What? Okay. So on the film, obviously there is a Facebook site, which is Here, There and Everywhere Film. So if you go, I think it's HTA Film, or you just look at Here, There and Everywhere Film or documentary, you'll find us. And also there is Here, There and Everywhere Movie.com. And that's a website which we're actually in the process of updating right now. And you'll be able to find information about the background of the film and the various trailers, and then the connection into the Kickstarter program for the crowdfunding.
Well said. And now it's time for my little spiel. I'm still perfecting the art of plugging myself, but here we go. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, if you haven't already, please hit that red subscribe button. Please like the video. Hit that bell notification so you get notified every time a new Fans on the Run episode gets uploaded, which at this point in time is twice a week, because it's the run-up to Christmas, because I am a generous little fucker. But yeah, leave us a comment, tell us what you think. You can also find this episode streaming just about everywhere good podcasts can be heard, some bad ones. So, the usual suspects, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Podbay. Basically, you know where it is. And please give us a rating wherever you're listening. I really appreciate any feedback you have on the show. And if you have any suggestions for the show or feedback, please reach me at fansontheRunpodcast@gmail.com, and I will try as hard as I can to respond to it. Whew, that went well. I think I actually did the spiel.
You did it. It was great. I was mesmerized there. You've done it perfectly.
So, anyways,
yeah,
Simon, it's been an absolute blast talking to you today.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for giving me so much time, and for also dealing with my sort of famously creeping lack of memory now.
You and me both, buddy.
Yeah, it's yeah. So I mean, no, great. I mean, there's a number of people that I think would love to talk to you. I would really like you to interview Tom Murray.
Well, we'll talk off air.
We will talk off air. But I'll give you a plug as well, which you can edit in. I've been asked by a lot of people to do a lot of things in terms of what we're doing with the film and the books over the years. But, it's if you really want to get your point across and actually have a really good blast doing it, and you have something to say about the Beatles, do get in touch with Ethan, because his podcast is really fresh and really different. And I think that he's going to be the next big thing on the podcast scene. So please do get in touch with Ethan and share your stories with him.
Aw. My heart is melting. But, thank you so much for joining us. To everyone else out there, thank you for listening. You can go home now.
Go away. Go.
Fans on the Run is produced by Ethan Alexanian. Additional voiceovers by Richard Phillip. This has been a Showtown production.